कार्तिकेय शर्मा जी नेटवर्क.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. President Donald Trump says he is open to a trilateral summit in Alaska with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The White House is currently planning a bilateral meeting with Putin at his request. President Zelensky also has said that Kyiv fully supports a joint statement by European leaders backing peace efforts. The leaders of France, Italy, Germany, Poland, the UK, Finland and the European Commission have praised the US President Donald Trump's initiatives while urging pressure on Russia and security guarantees for Kyiv and Europe. Meanwhile, one person was killed and 3 apartments were damaged in a Ukrainian drone attack on Russia's Saratov region, which also hit an industrial facility, Governor Roman Burskovin said on Telegram. Residents were evacuated after drone debris caused damage to the region. Tens of thousands have protested in Tel Aviv against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to expand the war in Gaza and seize Gaza City. Netanyahu's security cabinet approved the operation on Friday despite domestic backlash, military rumors of dissent, and international pressure. 3 Thai soldiers were injured, one losing a foot after triggering a landmine near the Cambodian border, just days after both countries agreed to a ceasefire. Thailand accused Cambodia of violating the Ottawa Treaty and its sovereignty. China is pressing the United States to ease export controls on AI-critical high-bandwidth memory chips as part of a trade deal ahead of a possible Trump-Xi summit. According to the Financial Times, Beijing has relayed this request to Washington through expert channels, seeking to lift restrictions that limit its technological advancement. South Korea's military has shrunk by 20% in the last 6 years to 450,000 troops due to South Korea's sharp decline in eligible male population for mandatory service. This is coming from South Korean Defense Ministry. The report warned that the shortfall in troops and officers could cause operational difficulties. Haiti has declared a 3-month state of emergency in its west and center regions amid surging gang violence that has killed over 1,000 people, injured 200, kidnapped 620, and displaced over 230,000 since October of 2024. We start our hour in Europe, where in the latest development, European leaders stress the need for a diplomatic solution to protect Ukraine and Europe's security ahead of the Alaska summit between Trump and Putin. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked allies for their support, emphasizing a fair end to the war and warning against Russian deception. Meanwhile, Ukraine's military announced a key victory in the Sumy region. Ukrainian forces have liberated Bezalivka village, clearing Russian troops from this frontline area. We're now joined by Ross Feingold, who's a political analyst. He joins us from Taipei, Taiwan, to discuss this in further detail. Ross, as always, pleasure to have you on the program. Ross, a huge development coming yesterday of this announced Trump-Putin meet in the American state of Alaska. However, the stress today has come from Ukraine's European allies, saying that Ukraine has to be a part of these talks, especially to reach a fair end to the war. If Ukraine is not involved in this meeting between Trump and Putin whatsoever, do you think there's any risk here of it becoming the exact opposite of that?
Well, the risk for Ukraine is that the United States is going to come back from the summit with a set of parameters that might be something Ukraine simply doesn't want to agree to. So Trump might persuade Putin to make certain kinds of concessions, a medium or even a long-term ceasefire. Most likely, this would involve Russia continuing to occupy large parts of eastern Ukraine. And again, the possibility, and the Europeans clearly don't support this, but the possibility is Trump is, and the United States is going to come back to Zelensky afterwards and say, these are the parameters, you better take it or leave it. And if you leave it, you're going to make President Trump extremely angry.
Indeed, Ross. We now know that Russia controls around 20% of Ukrainian territory. Do you believe that Russia will be satisfied with this, given the fact that Ukraine has said it will make no concessions, including that of Crimea, which was annexed in 2014 by Russia? What are your thoughts when it comes to territory? Donald Trump has said that there's going to be some possible territorial swaps here. Do you see Ukraine giving in that regard?
President Trump meant when he said land swaps, because I don't think there's any possibility of Russia giving land to Ukraine in exchange for what Russia is currently occupying. What I think President Trump meant was that Ukraine is going to have to accept the reality that part of its territory will continue to be occupied by Ukraine. And that goes back to our earlier discussion about Ukraine having to accept some kind of arrangement that allows Russia to continue to occupy Ukrainian territory. Now, when it comes to whether or not a ceasefire with those kinds of parameters will mean that Ukraine is safe from further Russian demands, that's something that the Ukrainian leadership, as well as most of the European leaders, have actually stressed throughout this period of the war, that Russia is simply not to be trusted. And unless there's a significant change in the policies of the Russian government or a new government, Russia simply cannot be trusted, and that there's a very high likelihood that even with a ceasefire, as long as Russia continues to occupy parts of Ukrainian territory, in the future, Russia might seek more territory, or they might turn their attention to Poland or the Baltic states. So the Europeans are certainly very concerned about the potential over the long term for Russia to seek greater territorial gains.
Yes, exactly, Ross, and that leads me on to my next question. How much weight do Europe have in these discussions? We've seen European powers like the UK, France, etc., the European heavyweights that are also staunch supporters of Kiev, come into this discussion and say that that Ukraine will need sovereignty, and also promises for European security remain a concern. Do you think that's in Donald Trump's head as well coming into these talks?
When it comes to the Europeans, I think, and of course, we should always be cautious of getting into Donald Trump's head. But when it comes to the Europeans and what President Trump is thinking about them, I think at the moment, the best we should assume is that President Trump thinks that whatever I negotiate with Putin, just like Ukraine, the Europeans are going to have to take it or leave it as well. And President Trump might have some leverage over the Europeans, whether that's with regard to weapon sales, with regard to the recent trade agreement and possibly reopening it. So it's very similar to what the approach to Ukraine might be. Assuming there is parameters of a ceasefire, I think President Trump is going to put a lot of pressure on the Europeans not to object to it. Now, up to now, the Europeans have been extremely united, with very few exceptions, in their support for Ukraine. And that unity has lasted over 3 years. But will it last when there's a ceasefire proposal on the table? That's unknown.
Yes, Ross, thank you. Do stay with us for further global updates. We will, of course, continue to bring you all the updates on that ongoing conflict, and, of course, covering those talks when they happen on August the 15th in Alaska. We now move on to the defining crisis of West Asia, where after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's announcement on the Gaza takeover plan, there are several protests taking place throughout the world, in London, Chile, and also in Tel Aviv in Israel. People in London are protesting the country's decision to ban the Palestine Action Group. As a result of the London police have detained more than 460 people who were protesting. Hundreds of people gathered at Parliament Square in London denouncing Israel's war on Gaza. Meanwhile, demonstrators are marching in Chile in a rally called Empty Pots, which is a pro-Palestine rally. The people are now marching through Santiago against Gaza's hunger crisis. People were also seen carrying Palestinian flags, banners and saying, "Stop the genocide." And Chile does not remain silent. There are also hundreds of people who have taken to the streets in Tel Aviv against the escalation of the war in Gaza. The protesters are demanding the release of hostages and an end to the war. Here's what the protesters had to say from Tel Aviv, London, and also in Chile as well.
Well, I feel really bad because I'm a retired prison officer. I've been retired 2 years. I've never ever broken a law in my entire life. I've upheld the law, but this law is absolutely ridiculous. To call people that are trying to stop a genocide terrorists is ludicrous, and this government should be shameful. They are complicit in genocide.
I think the new plan is just another plan that is going to fail, and it could very well be the end of our hostages, and of course it will take probably more lives of our soldiers. I don't think it's going to work. All the plans haven't worked up until now.
No podemos como humanos permitir esto. Están impidiendo la entrada de alimentos, de necesidades básicas de toda la población en Gaza y hoy están todos a punto de morir y lo vamos a ver todo por televisión. Y esto es lo poco que podemos hacer quienes no tenemos los lugares de poder en el mundo.
We're now joined by Professor Rohan Gunaratne. He's an international security expert. He joins us live from Singapore to discuss this further. Professor Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us. We have seen protests all over the world for many, many months now over Israel's war in Gaza. However, what we have been seeing as well, which is surprising, which is huge protests across cities, across Israel. Recent surveys indicate that around 67% of Israelis favour concluding the conflict in Gaza. However, Benjamin Netanyahu and his security cabinet continue to approve more plans expanding operations in the enclave. What are your thoughts to how Benjamin Netanyahu is acting in this conflict, and if he is really protecting the interests of the Israeli people in continuing this war in the manner that he is?
Prime Minister Netanyahu is a right-wing leader, and in his cabinet he has a number of right-wing politicians, and they are putting extreme pressure on him to dismantle the Hamas governing and the military structures. That means Hamas will disarm, Hamas will release the hostages, and Hamas will surrender. But this is unlikely to happen. It is unlikely to happen because there isn't sufficient support for him to do that. Of course, the security and intelligence community also wants Hamas rule completely ended, because with Hamas you cannot have an agreement, you cannot have a negotiation, because Hamas will eventually return back to violence. So what is important is for the international community to understand that after staging that attack, the devastating attack in 2023, Hamas is still clinging on to power in Gaza, and no ceasefire is possible with Hamas, because Hamas will not release these hostages unless Egypt and Qatar will come to an agreement for Hamas to surrender, disarm and release the hostages. So Prime Minister Netanyahu's position is driven by national security interests, national security considerations of Israel, because he doesn't want another attack to take place after a few years. So I think the people should consider the point of view of the Israeli national security experts, and also the pressure Netanyahu is facing both from the left wing and the right wing.
Professor Gunaratne, we've also seen Netanyahu go against his defense chief, his army chief, in this decision to retake Gaza City, possibly putting hostages and at danger, and of course, most likely going to cause a lot more bloodshed in the densely populated area. What are your thoughts on Netanyahu's governance claims that he is prolonging this war for his own benefit? As we've just cited, that 67% of Israelis disagree with the continuation of the conflict. The man at the middle of this, what's your analysis of his actions in the past couple of months, especially since international and domestic pressure continues to mount on him?
Netanyahu has lost very significant support globally and also within Israel. However, we must understand why that has happened. It is because the Israeli citizens have been constantly bombarded from Yemen, from Iran, from the Lebanese Hezbollah, and also from Hamas. So they want peace, and they believe that there must be a negotiated solution. There must be a ceasefire. But Netanyahu and the right-wing politicians are determined to end Hamas, meaning eliminate Hamas. And also, if that happens, the likelihood of the remaining hostages being released alive is very, very slim, because Hamas will kill them. Hamas has already killed a number of hostages. Hamas will have no hesitation of eliminating the remaining hostages. Of the 53 hostages, according to Israeli intelligence that has now been made public, only about 20 are alive, and even those hostages will be killed by Hamas if there is a military offensive. And that military offensive has just started after the Israeli Security Cabinet approved a plan to take complete control over Gaza.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Pleasure to speak to you, as always. We now move on. Gaza's Civil Defence Agency has said that at least 37 people have been killed by Israeli fire, including 30 civilians who are waiting to collect aid. Reports suggest that 12 people were killed and nearly 200 wounded when Israeli forces opened fire on them as they gathered near a border crossing in northern Gaza. 6 more people were killed and 30 wounded after Israeli troops targeted civilians assembling near an aid point in central Gaza. Thousands of Palestinians congregate daily near food distribution points in the enclave. Israeli restrictions on the entry of supplies into Gaza since the start of the war nearly 2 years ago have led to shortages of food and essential supplies. As a result, many countries have come forward to support Gaza with humanitarian aid. While expressing grief over the death of his son, Palestinian man Ismail Qandil has said that Gazans are sending their sons to bring food and Israelis kill them. Let's in fact listen in to what he has to say.
صار معنا الولد هذا رايح يجيب طحين ورايح يجيب أكل لإخوته وإحنا يا عمي فجأة دورنا على الولد دور على الولد قالوا في مفقود يا عمي في مفقودين في الشفا رحنا لقيناه مرمي على باب الشفا هو وكمان كم من.
We now move over to Europe, where German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has pushed bold changes in security, economic and migration policies during his first 100 days in office. He vows to build Europe's largest conventional army and strengthen support for Ukraine amid tensions with Russia. His approval rating has dropped, and controversies like freezing arms exports and rejecting the LGBTQ flag at Parliament have sparked backlash. Recent disputes over judicial appointments and refugee benefits have heightened tensions. Merz focuses on the big picture goals but faces pressure over coalition disagreements. We're now joined by Martin Saar-Arias. He's a foreign affairs expert and he joins us live from Germany. Thank you very much, Martin, for joining us here on the programme. How do you assess Chancellor Merz's first 100 days in office, particularly his bold security and economic reforms? He obviously beat out Olaf Scholz's Liberal Party after immigration failures and his popularity sank. But how do you analyse Chancellor Merz's first 100 days in office?
I think these first 100 days in office have been positive and also negative in several ways. The positive things are that he's putting a lot of efforts in strengthening the army because of the Russian threat. Germany wants to be prepared and wants to be stronger against any Russian threat. So he's giving a lot of budget to the army and to security issues. The second thing, and very important, is that Germany has been not developing itself for 2 decades approximately, and now he wants to give a lot of budget in renovating the infrastructure, the trains, highways, in general, to renovate the infrastructure that has been a little bit left behind in the last years. So that's a very positive thing. The negative thing about this new government is that they are failing in having a strong bloc, strong coalition in the government, and they are facing this dilemma that is between being in an alliance with the extreme right-wing ADF, which is not likely to happen, but is the only right-wing party that is willing to cooperate with Merz. And the other, which is more likely, is that Merz, even though he belongs to a right-wing party, he's willing to have a coalition of center-left parties to have a coalition. But again, he's not agreeing with these parties in a lot of issues, especially with the immigration issue.
Yes, Martin, thank you very much. Apologies, we seem to have some network issues there, but thank you very much for joining us on that. We now move on once again, where the Wall Street Journal reports say that senior Chinese diplomat Liu Jianchao, widely regarded as a potential future foreign minister, has been taken away by authorities for questioning. Liu was detained after returning to Beijing in late July from an overseas trip. Since 2022, he has led the Communist Party body responsible for managing ties with foreign political parties, traveling to more than 20 nations and meeting officials from over 160 countries. His detention marks the highest level probe involving a diplomat since former Foreign Minister Qin Gang was ousted in 2023. He was a former ambassador to Indonesia and the Philippines. Liu was known as a ministry spokesman for his humorous yet firm defense of China's interests. We're now joined by Esuma Katalka. She is going to give us a bit more context on what's going on here. Esuma, what can you tell us?
According to media reports, we now know that a senior Chinese diplomat, his name is Liu Jianchao, he's currently head of a department of the foreign ministry under the current ruling Communist Party, is taken for questioning. However, Chinese Communist Party has not commented on this yet. This is just according to local media reports and international media reports. We do not know the exact reason for questioning for this as of now. However, he just came back from his visit to Singapore and some southeastern nations, and on July 29 was his last visit abroad to Africa, and that includes several countries in Africa, not just one country, as well that includes Algeria. So for now, we do not know what exactly or why he was taken into questioning. But this has come into light because he is a significant figure in Foreign Ministry Department of China. He was said to be the future contestant for Foreign Minister of China as well, of this current Chinese Communist Party as well, and he has served as an ambassador earlier in some countries, including a few countries, and as well as he has served as a foreign ministry spokesperson for the current Chinese government as well. So he was seen as like senior figure also, and a future foreign ministry contestant as well. And last time something similar has happened with another foreign ministry person in this current ruling party in 2023. Back in 2023, another senior Chinese diplomat was taken to questioning, and then later his position was revoked from him. That was because his extramarital affair became public. So for now, we do not know why Liu Jianchao was taken into questioning. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Asuma, for providing that context for us. We now move over, but stay in the Indo-Pacific, where South Korean President Lee Jae-myung faces a critical diplomatic month ahead. His first major meeting begins on Monday with Vietnam's leader, Tu Lam, marking the first foreign leader visit since Lee took office in June. They will discuss deepening ties in trade, security, technology, and infrastructure. Later this month, Lee is expected to hold summit talks with US President Donald Trump, likely on August the 25th. The focus, however, will be on security issues, including North Korea's nuclear threats and the future role of US forces in Korea. This follows a new trade deal easing tariffs and boosting US investment. Lee may also meet Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba to revive leader visits between Seoul and Tokyo. Meanwhile, South Korean special envoys head to Indonesia to strengthen ties with President Prabowo Subianto. These talks signal a dynamic month ahead for President Lee on the international stage. We're now joined by Dr. Sanjay Kumar. He's a journalist for the Korea Herald, and he joins us live from Seoul in South Korea. Thank you very much, Dr. Kumar, for joining us on the program. When it comes to foreign policy, do you think that the South Korean people have the confidence that Lee Jae-myung will put South Korea's interests first and be a good representative for Seoul on the world stage?
If you exclude President Trump, then of course Korean people are very positive about Lee Jae-myung's pragmatic diplomacy approach. And this Vietnam engagement can be seen as one of the landmarks, we should say, because as you mentioned, correctly mentioned, that Vietnam's delegation is here, and there is a lot of positivity in the businesses from the Vietnam side as well as the Korean side, because both the countries, they want to reach the highest level of trade by 2030 by reaching $150 billion of trade. Already more than 10,000 projects of Korean companies in Vietnam are operational, and the relationship has been growing by leaps and bounds after 1992. So this visit should be seen as one of the milestones, and it is also important to note here that there are more than 300,000 Vietnamese diaspora is living in Korea. 250,000 Koreans are living in Vietnam. You can see the people-to-people ties here, and almost 100,000 multicultural families are built up by Koreans and Vietnamese. And Korean companies, they also see Vietnam as a very important gateway and destination for facilitating the global supply chains of the other companies, I mean the Korean companies. So there is a lot of euphoria. And from Vietnam side also, they want to achieve milestones under the motto of Doi Moi innovation process, which is going to mark 40th anniversary next year by 2030. So that is why there are many remarkable changes which can be seen in coming months and years. And from the infrastructure side, Vietnam wants to leverage themselves as with the artificial intelligence and the infrastructure. That is why the leadership there are meeting many conglomerates, including Samsung, LG, Daewoo Engineering and Construction, You might be aware that the Star Lake City project of the UNC has performed very well and well received by both the countries. So there is enough potential between these two countries, and President Lee Jae-myung wants to start with Vietnam, and it has a really deep significance, if I can say right now.
Yes, Dr. Kumar, thank you very much for your insight. Always a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you very much for joining us this hour, but that is all that we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.